We're going to get started. Hello and welcome to Managing Nonprofits, 5 Tips for Success. Today's webinar is sponsored by the Online Degrees in Business at the CUNY School of Professional Studies. My name is B. Lawrence Helft, and I'm the Academic Director of the Bachelor of Science in Business and the Masters in Business Management and Leadership, 2 of the many fully online degrees at the City University of New York's School of Professional Studies. It's my pleasure to host today's webinar. A few logistics before we get started. There will be an extensive question and answer session after the presentation, so please type your questions into the chat box at any time, and we'll make sure to answer them either during the session, or if we run out of time, we'll make sure to get to you by email if we can't answer it at that time. Also, this webinar is going to be recorded, so we will send it to you after it's edited. You can revisit it, and we'd love you to share it with your colleagues and friends. And now, I'm delighted to introduce you to today's presenter, Sondra Stewart. She's one of the most dynamic, insightful, and passionate people I've met in a really long time. I know you'll feel the same way the minute she begins to talk. Rather than my rattling off her long list of credentials, I'll let her vast experience speak for itself. Sondra Stewart, welcome.
Thanks, Bea. I hope I live up to your introduction. Hi everyone and welcome. My name is Sondra Stewart, and I have kind of an interesting background that I'll tell you just a little bit about so that you can understand where I'm coming from when I'm giving you my experience. I've basically, most of my career has been in the for-profit world. I've had many interim C-level executive positions, from CFO to COO to president, working with for-profits that are raising money, doing mergers and acquisitions, or are in a transition. And I also worked a lot with executives in helping them with their for-profit businesses. So that was my orientation when I started a nonprofit in Vietnam. So about 10 years ago, I was a co-founder of a nonprofit, which I'll tell you about in a little bit. And I spent the last 10 years living in Vietnam working with this nonprofit. I'm also on the board of other nonprofits, particularly one that's in India, and I'm a donor to nonprofits. So in terms of a nonprofit environment, I have the operator's view, I have the board member's view, and then I have the donor view. And they're all a little bit unique, and really what I'm trying to do and how I ended up talking to Bea in the first place is I feel like I have so much experience, and I've been so blessed to do these things and have this international view of what's going on in the nonprofit world that I just want to share. I feel kind of like it's my responsibility to share what I learn, and it's also my way of scaling. I only have so much time in a day and on this planet, I guess, and the way that I see that I can best use my time is to help other people. So if I can give my insights and what I've learned, and maybe things that took me 5, 10 years to learn, because I sometimes am slow when I'm learning, if I can share that with people that are doing great things here and abroad, then wow, that's my way of taking the 24 hours I have in a day and extending it to so many more people. And the thing that I really am excited about in working with CUNY is their idea of access with excellence. I realized after I really got to know Bea and talked about what they're doing here, is I could have learned so much in Vietnam when I was living there, because it's something that's available anytime. This information, this education, you can do from anywhere at any time, and at such a way that's it's affordable even for somebody living in Vietnam who's devoting all her time and money into starting a nonprofit. So I'm so grateful to be able to have this opportunity to help CUNY and to help share with everybody who's here kind of what I learned. So that's me, and hold on, let me see how to change this slide. There we go. And what I do want to do today, though, is tell you, as I said, share what I've learned. What I learned when I was running businesses and what I learned running nonprofits. And for me, I want to tell you kind of the things that surprised me, because I didn't have the background or education in running nonprofits. And there were so many things that when I started doing it was like, oh, wow. I had no idea. And then there were the things that just didn't surprise me, that friends of mine would say, oh, you know, when you get into the nonprofit world, this is going to be different or that's going to be different. And it wasn't, and it didn't surprise me. And then I want to tell you a little bit where I see the future going. And it's not that I've been out there researching and have the studies and the results, but it's just a feel from having been in the environment and talking and networking, especially now that I'm living back in New York, of where I see things going in this sector. So moving on, let me tell you a little bit about some of the three nonprofits that I'm currently heavily involved in. Streets International, it's a nonprofit in Vietnam, which is, I helped start it about 10 years ago. And what we do is we work with street kids, orphans, kids from terribly, terribly disadvantaged families, leper colonies. We bring some of our kids from leper colonies. It's heartbreaking where they come from, but where we take them is amazing. It's a small group. We can take about 25 kids every 9 months. It's an 18-month program, so we're staggering them. But at the end of those 18 months, they have all the skills to get jobs in the top 5-star resorts. So we're taking kids who have absolutely no opportunity and getting them, really jumping them up into the upper middle class, because tourism in a developing country is usually the first industry that takes off. So these kids, these lovely, wonderful faces you see smiling here, are getting jobs, making more money actually than the English teachers that taught them. It's a very intensive program, as I said. We run a culinary school because we're teaching them either cooking or hospitality at the front of the house. So we run a school. We house them. So I have at any one time 40 kids that are under our care for housing, food, clothing, doctors, medical emergencies, hospitals. We had half our class had dengue once. That's a whole other adventure. But it's an amazing program, and it goes very deep with a very select number of kids. Our results are amazing. We just got an award, or we're nominated for an award for Travel and Tourism of the Year, because we're actually a destination. In addition to the restaurant that we run a tour company where our kids are interacting with tourists that come to Vietnam. I'm also on the board of an organization called CorStone. And this is a San Francisco-based company, or nonprofit, that works in India. And this is almost the exact opposite, in that rather than going very deeply with a few kids, this is very broad. It is an organization that works with what they call resiliency skills. But basically, it's setting young kids up, and they work a lot with girls in India, but it's going to be expanding. I'm so excited. Teaching them the skills that they need to be self-reliant. The stories that are coming out of this program, it's an 18-week program of only 1 hour a week, I don't even know how they're doing it, because this is an area of India, Bihar, where child marriages are rampant. And I talked to one of the girls, oh, I don't have her picture here, and she and another one of her friends who had done this class went with another one of their friends and talked the parents out of getting their friend, their 14-year-old girl, married at the age of 14. Another girl was able to handle a physical fist fight between these two mothers that were like fighting over property. It's empowering these teenage girls to have the strength of character to do amazing things. And the exciting thing is with CorStone is, oh, I don't think this is a secret, we just got an agreement with the Bihar government to put this program, which was in a testing phase with 10,000 girls, into the entire school system. So 6 million kids are going to be impacted within the next couple years. And this one, it's interesting because you'll see as we go through this, a lot of it is about the results. Like with streets, we're focused on results. We have 100% placement within 2 months after graduation. The results with CorStone, it's phenomenal when you compare it to other life skill type programs that are out there. So that's CorStone. Next is Water Health, and this is a fascinating organization. And what they do is they provide clean water in very, very rural areas, as well as provide jobs for the local women. They tend to also like to work with women. It's an amazing organization, and it has some twists to it that I'll tell you about as we go along. But I just got back from India, and they were opening their first water health center in where was it? In Delhi. And what'll happen is, in a country where the water system is awful, if anyone saw, what is it, Slumdog Millionaire, you know, the fear of having water being contaminated is very high. And this gives certified clean water at a very, very, very low cost. And they're doing some really interesting things in terms of educating the community and going in with microscopes and showing the population what actually is in the water they're drinking by looking under a microscope. And it's so inexpensive that it becomes available to really anybody. So these are the three, probably the organizations that I'm closest to. And this is my orientation for what I'm going to tell you and what I've seen and some of the experiences I've had. Because with all this, one of the things that I just want to tell you about are the questions that people always ask me. And one of it is, what is it like to live in Vietnam and start a nonprofit? It was amazing. Being able to go into a country and be a part of it in a way that you're certain that you're giving back and not taking is wonderful. If anyone has the opportunity to go abroad and help a developing country like that, the rewards for me personally were so much greater than add up all the kids in Vietnam that we helped, and probably by now it's been 120 or so, and the great lives that they have now, and you take those 120 kids and you multiply everything that they got out of it individually, add them together, and I feel like I got multiples of that in terms of the joy that they brought to my life and the experience and the integration into the culture in a way that you just can't do as a tourist, and I don't think you can do as a business person. I met a lot of expats living in Vietnam, some that worked for nonprofits and some that were there for business, and it was just a different feel. It's different when you have the mission of really getting down deep into the country and the people than it is figuring out how to just employ them. Anyway, I highly, highly recommend it to anyone that has the slightest opportunity. And the other question I always get is, why did we start Streets? I never had an interest in nonprofits. I had no background in nonprofits, didn't know a thing about them, and certainly wasn't planning on living in Vietnam, but I had a partner who was very fascinated about it, very interested in Vietnam. And really, the way we came together was from my experience on the business side. He was presenting to Google. Google Foundation was interested in doing some work in the area that we were working in the country. And you can't just go into Google, and you can't just go into a lot of these companies now that are putting together these great foundations. You can't just go and say, hey, I've got this great idea. You need a business plan. So I spent about a month putting together all the financials and the financial portion of this business plan that we went into Google with. So it's kind of funny. The reason I got into nonprofits was my background in businesses and working with startups. And the last question I get, I don't know if it's much of a question as it is a statement that everybody, especially in Vietnam, would say. Doesn't it feel amazing to help so many kids? Yes, I told you what I got was in multiples of what I feel like we gave. But the biggest lesson that I have, or the thing that I took away that I would really want to share with anyone who wants to start something, or even, as I say, please, if you have the opportunity to go abroad and do it, is connect. I would find days and weeks would go by where I was in this beautiful, amazing country, and I sat in the office working on curriculums, working on budgets, working on legal issues with the government, and I didn't get out and meet the people. Luckily, I was there so long that I did have an opportunity over time to have those rich connections. But for people that are looking at doing like 6 months or a year of volunteering or working, please connect, because that's what you're going to take home. You know, I'm back here now. I'm still on the board of Streets, but I'm not there every day, and that's the thing that I think about. Those are the things and the memories that I have and will always have, are those moments of smiles with the kids and the mothers of the kids. Anyway, that's my biggest lesson. Some of the things that surprised me, you know, and maybe it's my own bias, but there is a business of nonprofits, and it's more and more and more. I know that in Vietnam, I had a dear friend who also ran an amazing program working with disabled women in the same town. And a lot of times funders would look to fund projects in a particular location rather than in a particular field. So many times she and I would come up and we'd have exactly the same people coming in and looking at what we did in order to fund us. And I would say 9 times out of 10, but I don't know that we had that many people come in, but every single one of them funded us and not her. And it's not that her program wasn't as amazing, and it's not that she didn't help as many women in a deep, impactful way, but nowadays, at least for the people that we were seeing, they wanted that business side. They want to know that your nonprofit is going to be around in another 10 years. And that the money that they're going to donate is going to go someplace useful. And in some ways, you know, there's a lot of talk now about a charity navigator and the amount of money that's being put towards administrative costs. And honestly, what I personally experienced is the reason people are looking at that is because of a lack of confidence in the business sense of the nonprofits. So we never had that question, but we came at it from the viewpoint of, look, this is what we're doing, this is how it's going to happen, this is how it fits into our budget, and nobody ever really took a look at, well, was it program-based? We never had to play with numbers because we could speak business. We could talk, you know, we had financials monthly, quarterly, going back from the very beginning. We have business plans. We could speak to the different areas of the organization that you had to have in place. And in some ways, I want to talk about how nonprofits and for-profits are becoming more similar. The other thing that really surprised me are the people. Managing volunteers and finding good staff was something that really surprised me. I thought they would be more difficult to find good staff and easier to manage volunteers. It turned out it was exactly the opposite. And then the last thing that surprised me was how this is so much like a business in terms of getting the word out and what happens with social media nowadays and about the story that you have to tell based on your audience. So to dig into each one of those a little bit. For me, looking at the business side of nonprofits, the places where nonprofits seem to fall down is one, it's in marketing. And I'm tell you what, I'm going to go to my next bullet because it has a little bit to do with the idea you have a product. And I put this in quotes because I thought I was going to be on video, and B said, no, you're not on video. You better put it in quotes because even now I'm sitting here using my fingers. And you have a product as a nonprofit. You do, whether it's a product or a service. It's something that you are doing that's good for somebody, and somebody's exchanging money for it. So thinking through any nonprofit and clarifying what is your product. For us, with Streets, it was very easy, and that's what allowed us to market better, is we had an experience with lovely trainees that were eager to share their life and practice their English with our guests. I know that's the product that we sold to all the guests coming into Vietnam that were donating money. Now, the product that we sold to the large foundations was a workable program with proven results that you can have confidence in investing in. Two totally different products. And that's how we marketed it. We never, when we were talking to Google or we were talking to some of the Atlantic Philanthropy, we weren't talking about, oh, these great smiley kids. No, it's about the numbers. It's about where you're going to get your return. And for the guests that would come in wanting to have this experience, we didn't talk about how efficient we were. So it's the product is different for different people. And then the people, we'll talk about a little bit more, but that's a key component. And for me, it wasn't what I thought it was. Systems in pretty much any business is going to have systems. And what I found is that a lot of nonprofits didn't necessarily feel like they needed to have business systems in place. So even as much as what's the quality control on this orphanage? You know, I know that sounds kind of strange, but a lot of good-hearted people, especially in Vietnam, are funding orphanages, and it's great and it's wonderful, but what's the process for putting it in place? What's the result you expect? And then how do you monitor it? And it was more like, okay, we're going to put the building there and we're going to give it money every year, but what's happening? And how do we track it? And how do we make sure we're getting the best possible experience for these kids that are coming in, and how do we make sure they're going to have a future? So the systems aren't necessarily always in place. The product we talked about, legal in, you would think that the governments in some of these countries, and I've had experience now in India and in Vietnam, would be welcoming for anybody coming in to help. Like, here's a gift. We just want to come in and help your kids or your people. And it's amazing the pushback you get. Good legal advice in country is critical. And then finance is something where you've just got to run it like a business. You can't say, okay, this is my budget and now the money's going to come from somewhere. You also have to take a look at it from, how much do I have? How am I going to get money? How do I think I'm going to get money? How much am I willing to pay to get that money? And then figure out how to spend it. That's kind of what I saw on the business side of this, is it's not just good people doing good things. But the interesting thing is I am seeing this merge between nonprofits and for-profits. And a couple things that are a little bit of upside-down models. Streets is what I would call an upside-down model. We are a 501c3 out of New York. In Vietnam, it's a for-profit, but it's a wholly owned subsidiary of the nonprofit, thereby essentially making it nonprofit, because if there were any profits, the nonprofit would get it, but we pay taxes. Because a lot of the developing countries, initially when we first started, made it so difficult for foreign nonprofits to enter the country. So it's really sort of interesting. It's like a nonprofit owning a for-profit. We were the first ever of its kind in Vietnam to do this model. And even in the United States, we worked with a marvelous attorney here that helped us work through how to do this. You know, because it's really sort of the same model like in New York. You would have MoMA's gift shop, which is a big moneymaker. He was kind of giving us all the rulings on it. But it's owned by a nonprofit. It's very similar. Water Health, who I donate money to Water Health in a way. Let me explain this. This is the organization I showed you the pictures of that I'm a donor to, and they put water facilities all over the country in India and Africa. They're going into South America, but this is fascinating. They are a for-profit. All of the capital costs for putting in their facilities come from nonprofits and governments, and they're looking at doing an IPO. Is that an upside down model or what? And that's what I'm starting to see is this blur between people's, this term social enterprise is really, really loose. I was on the panel, a panel was in Singapore about what is a social enterprise, because there's so many, it gets thrown around so much. Is it somebody who's just donating 5% of their profits just to saving the rainforest, or is it somebody who's doing something good but making money? And it's an area that's developing because it seems to me, and maybe again it's just the people I'm hanging out with, the consciousness is becoming that even nonprofits have a social responsibility. I mean, even for-profits have a social responsibility. That one, there's nothing wrong with doing something good and making money, and it's kind of your obligation nowadays. So I'm really curious as to these trends, but I see it becoming more and more blurred. And what's interesting, like in India, the corporate social responsibility has been mandated by the government. 10% of every corporation's profits are required to go to fund nonprofits. I know. So, then that becomes like in India, that's just kind of how it has to be. So the idea of, oh, you're such a great company if you're donating 10% of your profits over here, like, oh, you're great. It's mandated. It's required in India. There's also the rise in B corporations, which is sort of I'm curious as to how this ends up developing, because it's sort of just a status that says, yes, I'm verified and I'm doing good things, and it also has a little bit of a legal and corporate implication that you can't really change your mission statement. But what's interesting, I was having a conversation the other day, if you tie this with an employee stock ownership plan, you can actually have a 100% tax-free, owned by the employee, for-profit entity that is, it's mind-blowing what's going on. So I see one of the trends is that there's going to be more and more of a convergence and more changes eventually in the way we look at things with these two types of what used to be separate but are now converging entities. The people. I thought getting volunteers, somebody who was like-minded would be really great. They'd be great to work with because they're there, they're volunteering their time, they must be passionate. One of the things that we found in a lot of the other organizations that I was friendly with in Vietnam, we found that a lot of times volunteers were more difficult. And it comes down to setting expectations in the beginning and making sure that they get what they need and what they're expecting, and also that the organization gets what it needs and it's expecting. What's funny, though, is that is how I've always approached staff. When you're hiring good staff, you want to make sure that you're setting up, is the money what they're expecting? Is the flex time what they're expecting? So you kind of have that negotiation to make sure that everybody's in alignment. In the beginning with employees in a for-profit, and too often I've seen that not happen well with volunteers. My recommendation on this is really sit down and figure out what it is that a volunteer is getting and what they're giving. They're not there just to give. They're getting something back, and if you can't identify exactly what they're getting back, then it's not going to work. Some volunteers may be there because they want some time to travel, some time to work. Some volunteers want that connection. That is important. Some volunteers want something for their resume, but if you don't really identify each and every different reason that a volunteer has for coming, the relationship will go badly. That's probably true in a lot of relationships, isn't it? And there's also, what's interesting is one of the things that just really rang true to me recently is I watched this. For anyone who hasn't seen it, it's Dan Pink has this talk, and then they did a quick draw. It's called The Surprising Truth About What Motivates Us. And here in the U.S., we're pretty much comfortable. I know anyone who hasn't really traveled to some of these countries and looked in the slums and seen what's happening, you can think how difficult it is. And our unemployment rate is so high and it's so difficult. We don't really know how difficult it is until, at least I'll say for myself, I didn't know how difficult things could be until I actually went there. I'll never forget my first trip to Vietnam, which was my first time like getting into a country, into the depths, not as a tourist, but as somebody who's there to help. And I saw what people lived on and the situations they lived in and the amount of material things they had. And in some ways, the joy that they had, even in those situations. When I came back, and I took a walk on Fifth Avenue, it just blew my mind. I think I went home and donated half of my things. It's worth traveling. It's worth seeing these places. But we are comfortable here. I guess that's my point. And technology has allowed us this flexibility to be able to be, in a lot of times, wherever we want, to study, to learn from wherever we are. And these are some of the things that I see for staffing nonprofits is really key, because you can now staff nonprofits and bring in talent and bring in help and volunteers from all over. We've had people helping and working with us from all over the world because of this, whether they're volunteers or they're paid staff. And I would really, in whether it's your volunteer program or your staffing programs, really look at these trends: flexibility, autonomy, giving staff and volunteers the feeling like they matter and they have the ability to master things. And the kind of the last piece that I think is really important is getting the word out. It's really, my experience has been, it's really hard to keep up with what's going on in social media and in the technological ways that people are communicating nowadays. I mean, I was gone. I feel like I was in a time warp for about 10 years. When I left, you had to have a website, and then in that 10 years, you went from websites to all about Facebook. Now, nobody in the younger generations is even using Facebook. It's all about Snapchat and Instagram. It's happening so fast. Snapchat was around like 2011, and it's crazy. So please take a look at the ways that you can leverage the people who know that are doing this every single day to keep you up to date with the technology. And I guess a little bit I'm speaking from the viewpoint of somebody who's running a nonprofit. And if you're in the nonprofit and you're already focused on the social media, help explain this to people, because it's so easy to get focused on the doing good that keeping up with the day-to-day what's going on in the world, and the fastest thing I see changing is the social media. Help everybody. Help them realize that life is changing. But even so, it's really all about the story. No matter what, it's about connection. It's about painting the picture to create that connection and that story, but it differs from audiences, by audiences. For example, I think I alluded to this in the beginning. When you're talking to a foundation, they probably don't care about not that they don't care, but what they're looking for is not the picture of the starving child. They're looking for the results. That's their story, and that's their point of connection. For somebody who's an individual, yeah, it's that feeling like I'm going to help a person, I'm going to help a child. So you really have to differentiate when you're telling the story between the two. Like, for example, we have this right now. I'm working on a fundraiser, and we're not doing sponsor a child or feed a child for a day. The whole thing is about sponsor a COO. Because if we have a COO in India and it's going to cost X number of dollars a day, we can expand to 6 million kids. But it's a different story, and it appeals to different people. It appeals to the entrepreneur. It appeals to a person who knows how much you need to have executives and what the return might be in terms of numbers and efficacy, not that heartfelt, I'm one-on-one. Not that that's not there, but really what's the main story that you're telling. And just another, I put this down here so I wouldn't forget, How Great Leaders Inspire. It's a, Google it. It's a YouTube video or TED Talk that has helped me amazingly. And then my last advice back to social media is get a professional. It's so hard to stay on top of these things. I can't tell you from my own experience how much I valued having somebody do that. Okay, so here are my 5 tips. I told you a lot. Now I'll summarize them for you. To me, a nonprofit is a business. And particularly for the donors from foundations, the big foundations are looking for efficacy. They're looking for where their investment is going to be used. And the other thing is I do see the profits and nonprofit lines blurring. I think that nonprofits are going to have to act more like for-profits, and it's in part because for-profits are getting so interested in helping. So when you have the Gates Foundation, the Google Foundation, I'm trying to think, Hewlett-Packard is funding us on one of these, but you know, they're businesses and they're looking now more and more at for-profits as businesses. What's the money we're investing and what's the impact we're going to create? So I just see that as a trend, and it's going to happen more and more. People are people. Volunteers and staff don't. In some ways, it's the same. You may not be paying your volunteers, but you're paying them something. You're giving them something in return for their time, and it's really helpful to know what it is. And then getting to the story. If you don't have your story for your different audiences really mapped out, take some time and figure out, not as much from your perspective, but even more so from the people that you know you've touched and you've inspired, why? And what was that moment that made them say yes? Was it a smile of a kid? Was it a bar chart? It could be either. But what is it, and what was the moment that they decided to support you? And then the last thing for me, and it's only, I guess, because of my regret, is just connect. You know, whether it's a international nonprofit, whether it's something here domestically, connect with the people of the project, because that's also an additional payment for you. You know, if you're an employee of a nonprofit, yeah, you're getting paid, and unfortunately right now nonprofit staff aren't paid as well as a lot of the tech startups, let's say. So the added benefit that's priceless is the connection to whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's to the water and the environment or it's to the people you're helping. And that is all my slides, and I'll be happy to take and start answering some of the questions. Should I just, where should I? Okay, so the first question is it's from Jaya. How can I apply my accounting background? I have an interest in this. Oh my gosh, you are so needed. People that have a passion for helping plus know the number side of a business are invaluable. And you know, I don't know how you want to help as a staff, as a volunteer. I know plenty of people that need your help right now. And there are accounting firms that work specifically doing audits for nonprofits, because companies that are over a certain, I think they just changed it, I want to say $500,000 in revenue, are required to have a review or an audit every year. I would contact some of those accountants and talk to them about their clients, because they also can't do the accounting for their client. They have a bit of a conflict of interest. So I would contact, there's a number of them in the city that specialize. I don't know where you are. That's the beauty of this, is people could be anywhere. So wherever you are, that's who I would get in touch with. And also, you know, taking a look at nonprofits. But it's sometimes come with the passion and knowing that you are key. I hope that answered your question. Okay, so here's another question from Yamel. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. I got a BBA from Baruch and have 8 years of work experience at CUNY. Love to help others. What were your thoughts on to get funds or donations? Yeah. It depends a little bit on your project and how large it is and what you need. But the 3 things that I've seen, and this is, I'm trying to see, in pretty much all of the nonprofits that I work with, including the nonprofit that's really a for-profit, there are big grants, which is really a business-based sale, if you want to call it a sale. I'm doing the quote thing for those of you who can't see me. And then there is kind of a fundraising, community-based approach to where you're not necessarily looking for individual donors, but you're creating a community where people come together to help. And then there's individual donors that can be anywhere from small $5 all the way up to, you know, $500,000. And each one has its own approach. So it's kind of hard to answer it, but I see those 3 different types of fundraising approaches in all the different organizations that I work with. So I'd be if you have some more specifics and would like to email them, I'd be happy to give you more specifics to your situation. Oh, okay, so I'm going to do this. Can I do this one? Let me do this next one. Can you explain the extent to which networking relationship building has made an impact in your success? This is from Shannon. Oh man, it has been huge. With streets, I cannot think of a single amount of money that we have gotten, whether it's you know, to start up. We've got an amazing guy, the son of the man who started Ryanair in Europe, was our first donor, who paid all the startup costs for streets. Was all about a networking relationship. Every single one of our big donors has been networking. It's huge, and that's why even having small, this community thing where I said some fundraising gets done through communities, in my opinion, you're better off having small community-based fundraisers where you're putting together some number of people and generating 100,000 in donations, or I just call it revenue. I use business terms all the time. In revenue, versus just getting one donor to give you 100,000 in revenue, or probably even double that, because it's the networking. It's those 100 people all know 100 people, and those people you'll meet, some percent will know 100 people. So I think it's huge, and that's just been completely my experience on this. So from Laura, are there organizations out there available to help in getting a nonprofit started? We have a nonprofit status locally in the Dominican Republic, but are having a hard time knowing how to start on the process here. You know, that's a great question. I don't know the answer to it. I imagine there are. If there are, again, if you have some specifics, send me the specifics. And I do have a network locally in New York where I can certainly put that out and see if I can respond with a good nonprofit that works with nonprofits. That's the other thing that's interesting that I'm seeing in terms of trends. I have a good friend who has a nonprofit whose mission it is, who is asking about Jala? I have a contact for you. I have a friend who has a nonprofit that is designed just to provide accounting services at no or very inexpensive charges to nonprofits, and he's a nonprofit himself. So I'm sure there's something. I just don't know it off the top of my head, and I'm sure I can, through my network, and find it for you. So we'll get that out to everybody. Let's see here from Frank. Do you have any metrics on nonprofits that are well managed, meeting their mission, or those that are not meeting their mission? Wow, a lot of these questions I just can't answer. No, I don't. The reason I came here today is really to provide everybody with my experience and from my viewpoint, having done these things, worked with these organizations, what I see. I imagine it's all available online. I would be careful about where the information is coming from, though, because not all organizations are measuring what they're doing and doing amazing work. And there are so many, I ran into so many abroad that are doing amazing work, but they're not publishing their results. Like CorStone publishes their results. That's how they were approached by the Gates Foundation, actually found CorStone. It wasn't the other way around, because they have amazing results and are publishing it. That's the problem with some of the other nonprofits. They have amazing results, but nobody knows. So you could look, but I don't know how accurate that would be. Let's see. Oh, good. Veronica, thank you. NYC Con and NCPP are good local organizations which help folks wanting to incorporate as nonprofits. Great. Let's see. Let's see. The TED Talk speaker I recommended there are two. One was called What Really Motivates People, and it's Daniel Pink, and the other one, oh my gosh, yeah, How Great Leaders Inspire, and I am going totally blank on the speaker's name. I was going to try and go backwards in my slides, but I can't. So How Great Leaders Inspire, it's amazing. It's really great. It talks about Apple a lot, and it's so applicable to nonprofits or any business, any business. And here's another thing while I'm on a rant. You don't have to have a nonprofit to do good work. I mean, I'm just as about encouraging people that want to start something to start just something that's helping. There's amazing projects out there that are for-profits that are doing great things and in some ways may have more sustainability than the nonprofits who have to keep telling their story over and over again rather than having a earned income model that flies under the radar of a nonprofit. Wait, Sebastian, thank you. How do you go about recruiting board members for your nonprofit? Yeah, there's a couple approaches I've seen for this. At Streets, what we did is we worked with our network. It's always about a network, and the most important thing I think or successful thing I think we did is we had and have a advisory board and a governing board. And we don't have people join our governing board until they've been on our advisory board for a while, just to make sure that they fit in with our culture and that they are somebody that can do things. We look for an active board, so that was really key. And for us, it was all about the network. CorStone, there are search firms that recruit board members, and what's interesting there is they're looking at people that have an interest, and in a lot of times, our board was more of an active board. It wasn't as much a board that is directly investing. With certain boards, I worked with the East-West Institute for a while, and they had a requirement that all board members had to contribute a minimum of $100,000 a year, and if you were going to be the chairman, it was $1 million. So it's almost like are you looking for active strategy, doing things, board members, or are you looking for people that are also going to be able to contribute money plus some oversight? And there is the networking, and there are actually companies that do placement for board members, would be my answer to that. So from Laura, are you aware of the pros and cons of fiscal sponsorship versus obtaining your own nonprofit status? I'm not, Laura, I'm not sure what you mean by fiscal sponsorship. It may be a term I'm not familiar with. So write me back on that one, Laura, on fiscal sponsorship. And then Brian, currently in the process of starting a 501c3 down the road. There's a maze of reporting requirements we'll need to follow, but not many right now. in the early phases, how important is it to start working with a lawyer with an eye to longevity? Is it better to scale the legal side of things with growth, or get one early on that can stick with the org for a while? Good resources for legal advice for orgs. You know, our streets, we started early on because we intended to scale with excellent legal advice, and we also had the difficulties of starting something in Vietnam that was a for-profit owned by a nonprofit. I loved it. You know, the thing about the legal advice we've always gotten is the lawyers are required to do a certain amount of pro bono work, and our attorney, can I plug my attorney? Josh Brennan. He was amazing. Not only did he give us great legal advice, but he's a sponsor. He's given us more money over time and given us excellent legal strategy and structure from the very beginning. So my experience has been absolutely have it, and it, as a nonprofit, you know, if you find the right person, it probably wouldn't cost so much. I understand. Okay, Laura, another nonprofit who takes in money for your program so people can receive a tax deduction. Yes, yeah, we had a lot of that. We worked very closely with the Rotary Club because Australian donors who had mandates, we had an Australian donor who had a mandate to invest in Vietnam. They couldn't do investments into the U.S., and we were a for-profit in Vietnam, and they worked through the Rotary Club. Yeah, there are definitely organizations that do that. You know, there's another one in Australia. That's where we ran into it a lot. But I know the Rotary is one, and there is another organization in Ireland that will do that for the whole EU, because we ran into a little bit with the tax structure there. So if you're trying to do it in the U.S., I don't know of anybody because we're a 501c3. And internationally, I know some people. In terms of the question of, is it better to incorporate as a nonprofit or as a for-profit and getting money through a nonprofit? You know, it's interesting. With water health, it hasn't been an issue for them. They do really, really great work in something that's really highly needed and have amazing results. And there's also a revenue model there. So it's kind of what they're doing. You know, they're getting their money from governments and nonprofits and foundations. But they're big personalities, and they have I go to Beach Boys concerts, they're promoting them all the time. I'm off in India with some of the government officials who just love what they're doing. What it does, I think, for a small nonprofit, though, is it's almost like a stamp of approval. And, you know, now working in a nonprofit and seeing what really goes on, I have a different view. But for somebody who's not really into nonprofits and they're like, oh, this is a nonprofit and I'm donating, I think it makes them feel more comfortable. So if it's small, it's my own personal opinion, I'd say the nonprofit status is worth it. Anyway, that's my take. Oh, am I running out of time?
Well, it's almost out of time, and I do want to thank you so much, Sondra. Your webinar gave us so much food for thought. I know that I'm going to be thinking about a lot of the ideas that you expressed to us. Am I speaking? Oh, okay, I'm good. Okay, I know that I'll be thinking about a lot of the ideas that you presented to us today for a long time to come. Any questions or comments that were not addressed or answered, we'll address by email, and that way you can feel that you are going to be heard. I'm trying to get to the next slide. Okay, so what I wanted to make sure everybody does is recognize that we are the proud sponsor of this webinar today. The CUNY School of Professional Studies is the home of 8 fully online undergraduate degrees, not only the BS in Business that is today's sponsor, and 5 fully online graduate degrees, and certificates as well. And what I invite you to do is to check us out on our website at sps.cuny.edu. You're free to call us for more information. And if you want to write either to Sondra or to us about our bachelor's degree in business or the MS in business management and leadership, if you write to business@sps.cuny.edu, we will make sure to connect you to Sondra. What I would also like to let you know is that we have a physical campus in Midtown Manhattan at 119 West 31st Street, so that you can drop in and physically meet us as well. And if you liked what you've heard today, I am here to announce that Sondra Stewart will be developing a graduate course in strategic nonprofit management, and we will also be looking in the undergraduate curriculum as an elective as well. So we're looking forward to hearing much more from Sondra in the semesters and years to come. You can also go to our website and check out our events page. You will see information sessions on all of the degrees that we offer, and that way you'll know a lot more about what we are motivated to do. The CUNY School of Professional Studies was created in 2003 specifically to meet the needs of working adults. So we look forward to seeing you and hearing from you again, and I want to thank you for joining us today.